Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is St. Louis on the Air.
These are vanishing resources. So, I mean, I think it's really true to Larry's passion that he chose not only to find a site where this collection could breathe and spread out, but in that act also preserve something that would have been torn down. I mean, it was going to be torn down, this foundry. So.
I'm Shula Neuman, filling in for Sarah Fensky. Larry Giles was a force for architectural preservation. In the 1970s, he started the St. Louis Architectural Art Company. St. Louis was tearing down a lot of old buildings, and Giles would buy those materials, then sell them to rehabbers in the city. His passion for the work didn't stop with his own business. Giles is also the founder of the National Building Art Center in Sauget, Illinois. It's the nation's largest collection of building artifacts. Giles died last month at the age of 73 after battling leukemia. And today we're going to talk about his life, his legacy, and what the future holds for the National Building Art Center. And joining me in studio to talk about it are Michael Allen. He's president of the board of directors for the National Building Art Center. Welcome, Michael.
Hi.
Hi, and also we have Emery Cox, librarian at the National Building Art Center. Hi, Emery.
Hi, happy to be here.
Thank you. I first want to express my condolences at the loss of Larry Giles. He really sounded like a force. Is that a way to describe him, Emery?
Oh, absolutely. Just his presence, his intellect, everything about him was almost superhuman somehow. But at the same time, he was very personable. Like, don't get that wrong.
So, Michael, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, in their obituary, termed Larry Giles as the man who saved St. Louis. So if you could take us back to how he got his start in the architectural salvaging business and how he saved St. Louis.
Yeah, I think for a salvager, his sort of roots are a lot more holistic and vast. He didn't just take pieces of buildings and save them. He really got involved in the movement in the early 70s to preserve entire neighborhoods after a tour of duty in Vietnam and involvement in the anti-Vietnam War movement. He joined other veterans in the Soulard neighborhood, where he quickly went to work rehabbing houses. He had a company with some other partners that bought houses for cheap, sometimes up to $1 or $100, and got them into the hands of other rehabbers and rehabbed a few themselves. But really, what Larry saw was this gap around salvaging materials from demolitions. Early on, that looked like, a transfer to these rehabbers, the pocket doors and mantles that they needed to restore their beautiful homes. But increasingly, there was larger material, entire building facades, entire buildings that were just being thrown into the trash heap by the city. And nobody really had the stamina or skill set to take that on. And, Larry hadn't proven that. He just decided he'd become that person.
So he just did it.
He just did it.
And you said like whole facades. What kind of buildings are we talking about, and where, in what parts of the city?
Oh, all over the city, East St. Louis, Chicago, and now even New York. But buildings downtown, big office buildings like the Title Guarantee, movie theaters like the Ambassador Theater downtown or the Granada in South St. Louis. And one of his last big projects was the Century Building in 2004 downtown. But and then just on this block, we have the Wagner Mortuary, which was right next door to the Continental Building. We have the entire front elevation of that building. So, heroic stuff and things that have not, tasks that have not been surpassed nationally by any other salvager or salvage expert. Nobody collected, entire systems or facades. Everybody took the pieces that were easy to get to, that had the most sort of ornamental flair. Mm-hmm. But Larry wanted to try to keep it all if possible.
So how did he develop the techniques or even know the techniques to do that kind of salvaging?
Well, I mean, he had a background in mechanics. He worked on cars. His uncle was raced on the dirt track, the car called the midget car. So he was kind of a gearhead who had some, real comfort with tools, but when it came to the work with buildings, he in the end ended up making his own custom chisels, specifying the kind of standards for the pneumatic tools he needed for these jobs. Tools that nobody else in the country has.
Still, or did
still, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, these aren't patented, but nobody else was doing this, and other salvagers, definitely do good work. But I've as a preservationist see what they do versus how Larry did it, and it's apples and oranges. They're using conventional tools and sometimes, sadly, chipping or breaking pieces. Larry was so meticulous because he created, custom methods and custom tools.
Right. So I was actually want to learn a little bit more about that because he developed his own salvaging techniques. What did this allow him to save that somebody, Emery, who isn't, who is using more traditional tools or who maybe doesn't have that kind of mechanical know-how? What does it allow him to do?
Ooh, that might be more of a Michael question, actually.
I'm happy to defer.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some cases, it was a question of speed as well as material. Like, for instance, in the Century Building, where activists were trying to stop the demolition, and they decided the developers were going to take down the corners of this building in the middle of the night, and Larry's 2-month salvage schedule became like a 4-week schedule to remove an entire 30-plus foot high marble arch and other building materials. So his methods, allowed for doing that all safely, not damaging the material, and doing it on this crazy expedited time schedule while the building was literally falling down above him. I mean, he's on the ground working on this arch, and they're still every day chipping away at those upper floors.
Oh my God. There was a possibility that he could have been seriously injured then, it sounds like, or in many of these cases.
Some people have in the past. One of the buildings that we have stuff from is the Chicago Stock Exchange, and a man died in that, a preservationist, when the building collapsed.
Wow. Wow. I have just been told that we have a picture of that you took, Michael, actually, of Larry perched on that Century Building. It's on our website, stlpublicradio.org/STL on air. And I also want to take a moment to say, if anybody was acquainted with Larry Giles, who's not in this room, what was your what did you find most striking about him as a person and as a professional? You can join our conversation by giving us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. You can also send us a tweet at STL on air or email us at stlpr.org. So I want to get to the National Building Arts Center. So, Michael, I understand that in the early 1980s, Giles grew from just having his business to starting a path toward a kind of architectural museum. What inspired that?
Well, he was inspired by the work of Charles Peterson, who had been the historian who inventoried all of the buildings demolished for the Gateway Arch and had proposed a museum collection at the arch site. Based on this, unparalleled, unprecedented collection of cast iron historic architecture. That was in the Saarinen plan. It eventually fell by the wayside as the Park Service decided not to fund it, and Peterson ended up creating a very tiny architectural museum at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. Larry wanted the full throttle version of that, and especially as he was seeing, it wasn't just this urban renewal period. In his own days in the 70s and 80s, as some neighborhoods like Soulard and Lafayette Square were being put back together, other parts of the city like downtown and North City were losing entire areas still. So he said, this museum idea is as relevant as ever, and the material is just literally being carted away daily.
Right.
So we could do something even more comprehensive that isn't just the riverfront, but basically the entire story of the architectural heritage of St. Louis, and then eventually he pushed beyond that to a national collection and took on jobs in New York, Chicago, and then in recent years developed this long-term relationship with the Brooklyn Museum, which has deaccessioned a lot of its architectural artifacts to the National Building Arts Center.
Wow. So he originally, that wasn't originally in Sauget, though, that when he first started out.
No, originally it was in Soulard in a warehouse that where B-Works is now located, that he meticulously restored in his way, that was supposed to be a depot for, the shop he kept on Sydney Street. He really, he used to have you could see Larry Giles in a storefront. You could just walk in and buy something. Then, as entire building facades don't really sell off the shelf that easily, he needed one warehouse, then another over on 39th Street in the Botanical Heights area. Then he started storing stuff in random yards that, people would let him. He after the Century Building material came in, he just was maxed out and found this abandoned steel foundry, the Sterling Steel casting site in Sauget, which was big enough to hold the collection and then some, and to grow the collection, most importantly.
Most importantly. We're going to get to that in a minute. I am curious, though, Emery, you both worked with him very closely and knew him very well. What do you think made him so passionate about his work?
He was doing things that no one else was taking care of. So maybe he kind of felt that I'm the only one who can do this, and it's kind of my responsibility. There was also, I think, some just personality-wise, some inspiration from his childhood when he said that his grandfather would take him around town and point out buildings, and then later he saw the buildings coming down and wanted to kind of collect those and preserve those.
So he had this historical connection and a familial connection as well of his grandfather, pointed out why this was also significant.
Oh yeah, it was there from the beginning, I guess.
Yeah. And for you, Larry, what kind of a friend? Sorry, for you, Michael, what kind of a friend was Larry?
Oh, a very, very close friend, and somebody whose mind reached me in many ways, not just architecture and history, but politics, literature, art. He got me into the dirt track racing. We would go on adventures and explore, abandoned coal mines and ruins we would find. Travel together to New York. We had been talking in recent weeks about going to Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
So he could return and see Vietnam not as a soldier, but as a gentle human being.
Right.
And, one thing that sticks out is he came to my wedding, which was during the pandemic, and rather than talk about, you probably think we're talking about terracotta and cast iron, but instead he recites a rap from the radical hip-hop group The Last Poets from memory in a discussion, and then decides to gift on the spot this wedding present, which is the Socialist Thought and Practice, which is the English translation of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia's theoretical journal. My wife was born in Yugoslavia when it was still Yugoslavia, so
Wow. So he just had an omnivorous mind.
It's not just a building guy to me. He's just,
no.
He's kind of like a crazy genius. And just the kind of friend who would listen and learn about what people were into and always be coming up with a suggestion, sending you a link, showing you an event he heard about or a book that he had seen,
That's incredible. Minds like that are rare, I think. If you're just joining us, we're discussing the memory and legacy of Larry Giles, founder of the National Building Arts Center. Giles died last month, and joining us to talk about their friend and colleagues are Michael Allen, president of the board of directors for the National Building Arts Center, and Emery Cox, the librarian of the National Arts Center. Emery, you first got involved with the Building Arts Center, National Building Arts Center, in 2016. You were first a volunteer. How did you transition to being librarian, being a paid employee? What drew you to this?
Well, what drew me to it, I guess, maybe it's a personality thing, but just kind of bringing order to the chaos and describing everything. There's just so many materials. We have hundreds of thousands of items, from print items to artifacts and stuff. But I guess Larry liked what I was doing. I had been kind of doing some book cataloging for the volunteer basis, and he wanted me to work on other projects and make it a more regular thing.
And it's developed into a passion.
Oh, absolutely a passion. Yeah. I can't just look at a building and see something. I see features now.
Oh, that's fantastic. So tell me, since you are there every day, this place is massive. Was it 13 or 14 acres? Is that what you said, Michael?
15.
15 acres. So, Emery, can you give us a sense of the scope and the range of the collection?
Oh, it's truly national. As Michael mentioned, we started out kind of with a bunch of St. Louis stuff, but then the artifacts have branched out to, I think there's some stuff from Los Angeles and Chicago and New York. But then for the print library, it's actually international in scope. We have a lot of treatises on, classical architecture and European architecture, and, even also into some Asian architecture too, and materials on engineering, mining, just all the steps from labor all the way to the built environment, architecture and all.
And now people can't just go and visit the site, right? It's not open to the public per se, but I understand you can make an appointment to go. That's accurate? You can, if you want to go see everything, you can make an appointment?
Yeah, feel free to contact us. The website is nationalbuildingarts.org, arts with an S, and you'll find a link to my email under the research library page.
And we'll be sure to include that also on our website. So are there plans for making this amazing collection more accessible to the public?
Definitely. I mean, I think we shouldn't omit the fact that, Larry had already taken this from, just in the last few years, something that was a complete, unlisted address of a project to something that has a librarian who you can contact for an appointment. And several scholars have come in to work on book projects, everything from the monograph on the Chicago Wrigley Building to the history of terracotta in Milwaukee. So it's already up and running, and the one day a week you can make an appointment to come is invaluable for scholars. But we hope to grow that to 5 to 7 days a week in the near future. Our task now is to take what Larry got us to a really high level of advancement and operation. I mean, a library with books on shelves and the artifacts in a manner where, they're not annotated yet, but you can really look and interact with a lot of the collection in ways that weren't possible when they are crammed into his warehouses on this side of the river. But we really hope that public access is something that's achievable in the next year or so. At least one day a week where, in addition to the library, there might be a docent-led tour or other way to see the collection and then grow it from there.
And the goal being just to give people an appreciation and education about architecture.
About the collection, and also the foundry itself, which is one of the rare projects in the U.S. right now where anyone is preserving a historic gray iron steel foundry as it is with every building. And we have all of the materials for the company, too. So that's a pretty unusual operation, a little different than like Bob Castley's Cementland, but kind of on the same page of these are vanishing resources. So, I think it's really true to Larry's passion that he chose not only to find a site where this collection could breathe and spread out, but in that act also preserve something that would have been torn down. It was going to be torn down, this foundry. So,
wow. He also saved the foundry. That's
yes.
True. I just picked up on the irony there. Yes. We do have a couple of people who have tweeted to us. We received one tweet from Reese, who says, I was over there at the National Building Arts Center many years ago and tried to buy some of the lion figures from Giles because I didn't know it was an architectural museum type place. I did not come back with any lions. And we
sounds
also,
right.
Yeah. And also we received some wonderful photos from listeners on Twitter this morning. Twitter user Torcho sent us a photo of a Scruggs, Vandervoort, and Barney plaque that he gave to Larry last year. That's an old St. Louis department store. Michael, why do people regularly just bring treasures over to the center?
Sometimes. We're known as a place where something like a plaque, not a museum's not going to take that. Most people won't take that. An antique dealer might give you $50 for it, but everyone who knows that's priceless might come to us. And certainly wreckers. Larry had a great rapport with demolition contractors, even though he opposed demolition. He really didn't like to have to do this work. But they knew he would care about certain pieces and, he could barter or buy pieces, even if he wasn't the salvage, guy. If someone else was, they would bring something by knowing it probably should be in Larry's collection.
Yeah, wow.
And then, that snowballed into this national thing where, the Brooklyn Museum came to us. Oh, you're the people who collect these materials. Do you want all of New York's treasures? We don't have space
really
for
amazing.
them.
Yeah.
We have more New York than New York does now.
That's kind of crazy, actually. And moving forward, Emery, do you have a sense for how the center will continue to grow and develop?
I think we hope to have, like Michael said, at some time where the public can definitely just come in. And the main Foundry building is slated to be the future exhibition hall. So we'll have some stuff hopefully out of the crates and where you can see like entire building facades. Perhaps we have the instructions to reconstruct them.
It's a little mind-blowing to imagine walking into a place and then seeing a building facade. And then what about contracting or discussions with other cities that also are interested in historic preservation? Is there any discussion around that, Michael?
Certainly. I mean, I think we never had gotten to a point where any of our policies were formalized. But as we move forward and formalize accession policies, I think we'll be able to offer cities, developers, anybody listening right now, an opportunity to gift something if they think it really belongs in our collection, and we think the same. Obviously we're going to have to fill Larry's shoes in terms of somebody who can do all that physical work.
Wow,
and
yeah,
that's a tough job.
I'd say tall shoes or big shoes to fill,
yeah.
Rather. Emery, do you get inquiries from people who are interested in researching in the collection? And if so, what kind? What are people interested in?
Oh, absolutely. I think we heard about like the terracotta researchers, and that's been a big area, like which has led to publication of books. But we've also had people researching recently some theaters in the area, and in particular the Scoris brothers. They were St. Louis theater magnates back in the day, and we happen to have archives that deal with their work.
It's incredible. Finally, I really would like to hear from both of you about how you hope to carry on Giles' legacy. And Michael, I wanted to start with you. Are there any particular projects or ideas that you're focused on right now as board president?
Well, I mean, I think foremost is bringing the Statue of Liberty to St. Louis, not the actual statue and not the replica that France is gifting, but there's a 1/3 scale replica that was on top of a warehouse in Manhattan that is in the parking lot of the Brooklyn Museum that has already, been pledged to us. And Larry had built the base to the actual specs of this conservation plan. And it's just awaiting the statue to go atop that. So that's our first thing, is to finish this project Larry started to bring the Statue of Liberty replica to St. Louis, where it'll face the Gateway Arch. And there's lots of conversations about American ideals and our future we can have in that space. In addition, it really gives the Foundry, an iconic sort of mark. Right. But I think the number one goal beyond that very specific project really is public access and getting people in to use the library and getting the site in a condition where there are more tours. And then we also have projects, long-term research projects around the collection, like a catalog of cast iron with critical and scholarly essays, books that could come out of the project. I'd like to see, residency programs for scholars and even artists. We've had a lot of artists who have done work with the collection, and exhibited all over the country. So, it's interesting, like to artists and certain kinds of scholars, this place is legend. While the general public might not even know what it is, it's like, there's some people who just know this. And when Larry's death was, first in the news, just flooded with oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Yeah. Whereas a lot of St. Louisans probably are hearing about it for the first time today.
Sadly.
But all are welcome. So
no, it's really cool.
We'll work with anyone.
So you've got a laundry list, I'd say, of things you want to do. What about you, Emery?
Oh, I would like to help, however I can in those projects. And I think a big part of that is just kind of figuring out, not just figuring out what we have, but cataloging and inventorying that stuff and kind of getting an idea out to the public as to what resources are even there.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we have to stop this conversation. I want to thank you both, Michael Allen and Emery Cox, for joining us today to talk about the memory of Larry Giles and his legacy at the National Building Arts Center. I also want to mention that there's going to be a memorial program honoring Larry Giles on Saturday, August 7th at the National Building Arts Center in Sauget. We have more information about that late afternoon event on our website.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here. If you learned something new from today's episode, consider leaving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the easiest way to help people discover our show. We appreciate it. Thank you. St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri, St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.